The rain hammered down like bullets against the cracked asphalt, turning the alley behind Murphy's Diner into a river of oil-stained water and forgotten dreams. Lena Brooks kicked the back door open with her hip, both arms wrapped around a trash bag that smelled like burnt coffee and yesterday's meatloaf. Her sneakers were soaked through, her uniform clung to her like a second skin, and every muscle in her body screamed for rest after pulling a double shift that should have been illegal, but wasn't. She was 3 steps from a dumpster when she saw him. A man huddled against the brick wall, knees pulled to his chest, shivering so violently that his whole body seemed to vibrate. His clothes were layers of torn fabric held together by grime and desperation. Rain poured off the brim of a destroyed baseball cap, and in his hands he clutched a piece of cardboard with words bleeding in the downpour. Just hungry. Lena stopped. She should keep walking. She had $23 in her pocket, rent was due in 4 days, and her brother Marcus needed new shoes because his toes were literally poking through the front of his current pair. She should definitely keep walking. She turned back toward the door instead. 5 minutes later, she was crouching beside him, holding out her own dinner wrapped in aluminum foil and a cup of coffee that was still warm. "Here," she said softly. "Take it." The man's hands trembled as he reached for the food. Up close, she could see his face was younger than she'd expected, hidden under weeks of neglect. His eyes met hers, and something about them made her chest tighten. They were storm gray, intelligent, and filled with a sadness that seemed older than his years. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracked and raw. Lena pulled the 3 crumpled bills from her pocket, the ones she'd been planning to use for gas, and tucked them into his coat pocket before he could protest. "Take care of yourself, okay? There's a shelter on 5th Street. Promise me you'll go there if it gets too cold." He looked at her for a long moment, those gray eyes searching her face like he was trying to memorize it. "You already helped me more than you know." She smiled, squeezing his shoulder once before standing up. The rain soaked through to her bones as she walked back inside, but something warm settled in her chest anyway. She didn't know his name. She'd never see him again. But for one moment on one terrible night, she'd been able to make someone's world a little less cold. That was enough. Inside, Rita was wiping down the counter with the kind of aggressive energy that meant she'd been waiting to talk. "You gave him your dinner again, didn't you?" Lena grabbed her jacket from the hook, avoiding eye contact. "He needed it more than me." "Lena, baby, you can't save everyone." Rita's voice softened. "You can barely save yourself. When's the last time you ate a full meal?" "I'm Fina. You're too soft-hearted. Kindness doesn't pay rent, sweetheart." Lena laughed, but it came out hollow. "Maybe not, but it helps me sleep at night." She walked home under flickering streetlights, her stomach growling, wondering if the man had eaten the sandwich yet, wondering if he'd found somewhere dry to sleep, wondering why the world had to be so cruel that a hot meal felt like a luxury instead of a basic human right. When she finally crawled into bed next to Marcus, who was already asleep with his math homework still spread across his pillow, she thought about those gray eyes one more time before exhaustion dragged her under. She had no idea that everything was about to change. The next morning arrived too early and too bright. Lena dragged herself through the motions, making Marcus breakfast, checking his homework, reminding him about his permission slip, all while her body operated on autopilot. The walk to the diner felt longer than usual, her feet protesting every step. But something was different today. 3 sleek black cars were parked outside Murphy's Diner, looking as out of place as diamonds in a trash heap. Lena pushed through the door to find the entire staff clustered around the front window, whispering frantically. "What's going on?" she asked, dropping her bag behind the counter. Rita grabbed her arm, eyes wide. "Some billionaire is coming here. Like a real one. They said he owns half the city. Why would a billionaire come to Murphy's?" "No idea, but management's been cleaning for an hour. Tommy almost had a heart attack when they asked him to actually mop the floor." Lena shook her head, tying her apron. "Well, billionaire or not, people still need coffee. Let's get to work." She was refilling the sugar dispensers when the door opened. The entire diner fell silent, and when Lena looked up, the sugar dispenser slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. It was him, The homeless man from the alley. Except he wasn't homeless at all. His hair was clean and perfectly styled. His face shaved to reveal sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. He wore a suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. And he carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from owning rooms before you even entered them. But those eyes, those storm gray eyes were exactly the same. He walked straight toward her, and Lena felt like the floor was dissolving beneath her feet. Around her, the staff scrambled into action, but everything felt muted, like she was underwater. "Lena Brooks," he said, his voice steady and clear, nothing like the broken whisper from the night before. "I don't understand," she managed. "My name is Alexander Cross. I own Cross Industries, along with several other ventures throughout the state." He paused, and something soft flickered across his face. "Last night, in the rain, you gave me your dinner and your last $20. You didn't know who I was. You didn't want anything in return. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped." The entire diner was staring. Lena felt heat crawl up her neck. "I'm sorry, I don't." "Why are you here?" "Because I want to return what you gave me. And more." Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I'd like to offer you a position as my personal assistant at Cross Industries headquarters. The salary is outlined in this packet, along with full benefits, housing assistance, and education opportunities for you and your brother." Lena's hand shook as she took the envelope. She opened it with numb fingers, and the number on the first page made her head spin. It was more money than she'd seen in her entire life combined. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because it's charity. Because I didn't help you to get something in return. Because," her voice cracked, "because this feels like a dream, and I'm terrified I'm going to wake up." Alexander's expression softened. "It's not charity, Lena. It's recognition. You have a quality that's rare in my world, genuine compassion. I need someone around me who sees people, not opportunities." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Please, give me a chance to show you that your kindness mattered." She looked down at the envelope, then back at him. Those gray eyes held something she couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or loneliness wearing an expensive suit. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, I'll try." The smile that crossed his face was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know what you think Lena should do next. And stick around, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. The first week at Cross Industries felt like Lena had been dropped into an alternate dimension. The building was all glass and steel and impossible elegance, filled with people in designer clothes who spoke in acronyms she didn't understand. Her office was bigger than her entire apartment, with a view of the city that made her dizzy. Alexander was patient, walking her through everything personally instead of delegating to HR. He showed her his schedule, explained his business philosophy, introduced her to key players with a hand resting lightly on her shoulder like she belonged there, like she was important. "You're doing great," he told her on Friday afternoon, catching her as she frantically tried to organize his calendar around 3 overlapping meetings. "I feel like I'm drowning in spreadsheets and learning a new language," she admitted. "You are, but you're swimming too. That's more than most people manage." He perched on the edge of her desk, and she tried not to notice how the light caught his profile. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why did you help me that night? And please don't say it's just who you are. I want the real answer." Lena set down her pen, considering. "When I was 12, my mom got sick. Really sick. We couldn't afford treatments, couldn't afford anything. I watched people cross the street to avoid us when we asked for help. I watched them look right through us like we were invisible." She met his eyes. "I swore that if I ever had the chance, I'd never make anyone else feel invisible. Even if all I have is a sandwich, at least it's something. At least it says I see you." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry about your mother. She died when I was 15, but she taught me that being poor doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes the smallest acts matter most." Lena smiled sadly. "Is that why you did it? The whole undercover thing?" "Yes." He stood, walking to the window. "When you have money, everyone wants something. Every smile, every compliment, every friendship. There's always an agenda underneath. I wanted to know if anyone would help me when I had nothing to offer, when I was just a person in need. And you were the only one who stopped." In 3 weeks of wandering those streets, you were the only person who looked me in the eye and saw someone worth helping." His voice went rough. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Something that made Lena's pulse quicken and her breath catch. "I should get back to work," she said quickly, looking away. But she felt his gaze linger on her even after he returned to his office. The days blurred together into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Lena learned the business, learned his preferences, learned the way his jaw tightened when he was stressed, and how he took his coffee at different times of day. She started anticipating his needs before he voiced them, organizing his world with an efficiency that surprised them both. But it was the small moments that mattered most. Late one evening, she found him standing on the penthouse balcony connected to his office, watching the city lights flicker to life below. She'd stayed late to finish a report, and something about his posture, lonely, distant, untouchable, made her set down her tablet and join him. "Beautiful view," she said quietly. "I bought this building partially for this view. I thought it would make me feel less alone, being able to see the whole city." He laughed without humor. "Turns out you can be surrounded by millions of people and still feel completely isolated. Is that why you went undercover? To feel connected again? Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to know if the person I used to be still mattered. Before the money, before the empire, I was just Alex Cross, a kid from nowhere with big dreams. Somewhere along the way, I lost that person. I wanted to see if anyone would care about him." Lena leaned against the railing beside him. "For what it's worth, I liked him. The man in the alley who said, 'Thank you,' like it meant something. He seemed real." Alexander turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "What if I told you he's still here, underneath all this? Then I'd say you should let him out more often." They stood there in the gathering darkness, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, far enough that propriety remained intact. But something had shifted, something undeniable and terrifying and electric. "Lena," he started, but his phone buzzed with an emergency call from Tokyo, and the moment shattered like dropped glass. She told herself it was better this way. That mixing business with anything else was a disaster waiting to happen. That men like Alexander Cross didn't fall for small-town waitresses, no matter what fairy tale suggested. But her heart didn't listen. Over the following weeks, they fell into a pattern of almost moments. His hand brushing hers when he passed her documents. The way his eyes followed her across a room during board meetings. Coffee breaks that stretched longer than necessary, filled with conversations that wandered from business to philosophy to childhood memories. She learned about his mother, who died when he was young. His father, who built the company from nothing and taught him that wealth was responsibility, not privilege. His loneliness at the top, where success meant never knowing who to trust. She shared stories about Marcus, about their tiny apartment that somehow held more warmth than this entire building, about dreams she'd buried under bills and survival, about the strange guilt that came with suddenly having everything when she'd spent so long with nothing. "Don't feel guilty," Alexander told her one evening as they worked late, reviewing contracts. "You earned this. Your compassion, your work ethic, your integrity, those have value. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. Even when they whisper that I'm just a charity case, that you hired me out of guilt." His jaw tightened. "Who said that? It doesn't matter. They're not entirely wrong, are they? You did hire me because of what happened in the alley. I hired you because you showed me that good people still exist, because you made me want to be better, because—" He stopped, something flickering across his face. "Because you're exactly what I needed, even if I didn't know it." The air between them felt charged, heavy with words unspoken. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs as he leaned closer, his eyes dropping to her lips before meeting her gaze again. "Alexander," she whispered, not sure if it was a warning or a prayer. The office door burst open. Rebecca Chun, the VP of Operations, and a woman who looked at Lena like she was gum stuck to her Louboutins, strode in with her phone already extended. "We have a problem." The spell broke. Alexander straightened, his expression shifting into professional neutrality so quickly It was like watching a mask slam down. What kind of problem? Rebecca's smile was razor sharp, the kind that's trending on social media. She turned the phone around, and Lena's stomach dropped through the floor. The screen showed a photo of her and Alexander on the balcony, standing close, his hand near her face like he was about to touch her cheek. The headline screamed, "Billionaire's secret romance." Did he fall for his homeless experiment? There are more, Rebecca continued, swiping through images. Them having coffee, walking through the parking garage, laughing together in his office. Each one carefully angled to suggest intimacy, romance, scandal. The story is that you and Mr. Cross were involved even before your employment. That the whole homeless test was staged as a romantic gesture. That you're, and I'm quoting here, a gold digger who played the long game. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Around them, she could hear phones buzzing, voices rising in the hallway. The story was spreading like wildfire. "This is absurd," Alexander snapped. "Lena had no idea who I was." The entire point was. The point doesn't matter. Perception matters. Rebecca's eyes glittered with something that looked like satisfaction. "The board is calling an emergency meeting. They want to discuss damage control. Fina, schedule it for tomorrow morning. They want it tonight." And Alexander, Rebecca's smile sharpened. "They want her gone. It's the only way to stop the bleeding." Lena stood frozen, watching her entire new world crumble in real time. She'd known it was too good to be true, known that girls like her didn't get fairy tale endings. The universe always collects its debts. "Give us the room," Alexander said quietly. Rebecca left with obvious reluctance. The moment the door closed, he turned to Lena, reaching for her hands. "I'm going to fix this." "How?" "By firing me, putting out a statement that I was just an employee, nothing more." She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "They're right, you know. In a way, I'm a gold digger. Not intentionally, but I went from nothing to everything because of one act of kindness. How is that fair to everyone else who works here? Everyone who earned their position through years of education and experience." "Lena, that's not. I should go." "Where?" "Home. Back to my real life. Before I got too comfortable in this fairy tale." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of him. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Cross. It was incredible while it lasted." She walked toward the door, each step feeling like moving through concrete. "Lena, wait. Please." She paused, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. If she looked at him, she'd break. "What?" "That night in the alley, you asked me to take care of myself. Let me do the same for you now. Stay. Fight this with me. Don't let them take away what you've earned." "I haven't earned anything. That's the problem." She finally looked back, and the raw pain on his face nearly broke her resolve. "You wanted to know if people would help you when you had nothing. I did. But you can't build a life on one moment of kindness. That's not how the real world works." She left before he could respond, walking past curious stares and whispered conversations, past the glass and steel and impossible elegance, out into the night where the rain had started again. It felt appropriate, like the universe weeping for a dream that died too young. By the time she reached her apartment, her phone had 17 missed calls from Alexander and one very clear voicemail. "Don't make any decisions tonight. Please, let's talk in the morning." But Lena had already decided. She spent the night composing a resignation letter, each word feeling like pulling out pieces of her heart. By dawn, she had it perfect. "Mr. Cross, you asked me once why I helped you. I said it's because I wanted people to feel seen, to know they mattered. But I think you were looking for something else that night. Proof that pure motives still exist in a cynical world. I was that proof. But proof isn't the same as foundation. You can't build a working relationship on one act of kindness any more than you can build a house on a single brick. The board is right. My presence here creates problems that outweigh any value I bring. You wanted to find someone who cared for you without knowing who you were. I did. But maybe that's not enough for your world. Maybe it was never meant to be. Thank you for showing me what was possible, even if only for a little while. Lena Brooks." She printed it, sealed it in an envelope, and left it with security before sunrise. Then she powered off her phone, called in sick to the diner, and spent the day in bed, letting Marcus believe she had the flu while her heart shattered into pieces small enough to sweep away. She didn't see the chaos her departure caused. Didn't know that Alexander read the letter 17 times, each reading making his chest tighter. Didn't know that he sat through the board meeting in complete silence while they discussed PR strategies and reputation management. Didn't know that when they finally suggested he make a statement denying any personal involvement with her, he stood up and walked out without a word. His assistant found him an hour later in his office, staring at Lena's employee photo on his computer screen. "Sir, the board is waiting for your decision. Tell them I'll have an answer by morning." "And Ms. Brooks?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "What did I tell you when I first started this company, James? About why I was doing it? You said you wanted to build something that mattered, something that helped people instead of just extracting value from them." "Exactly. I wanted to be different, to prove that success and integrity weren't mutually exclusive." He laughed bitterly. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I let the board and the shareholders and the quarterly reports become more important than the actual mission. I became the thing I swore I'd never be." "I don't understand, sir. When I was on those streets, no one helped me. No one except Lena. She gave me food when she was hungry, money when she had bills to pay, kindness when the world taught her to be suspicious." Alexander turned from the window. "She showed me what I was supposed to be, and I repaid her by letting my world destroy her. So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to fix this. But first, James, do you still have that crumpled $10 bill I brought back from the streets?" "The one she gave me. It's in your safe, sir. Get it for me. I need to return something that doesn't belong to me." The rain started again that evening, and Lena found herself standing at her window, watching water stream down the glass. Marcus was at his friend's house, giving her space to recover from the flu, which really meant space to grieve a future she'd barely tasted before it was ripped away. The knock on the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened it to find Alexander Cross standing in the hallway, soaking wet, with no bodyguards or handlers or expensive car waiting below. Just him, wearing jeans and a t-shirt she'd never seen before, holding something in his clenched fist. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "I read your letter. 20 times, actually. And every time, the same sentence killed me. Maybe that's not enough for your world." He stepped closer, and she could see rain dripping from his hair, could see the exhaustion and determination in those gray eyes. "You're right. It's not enough. Not because it's insufficient, but because I don't want to live in that world anymore. Alexander, I'm not finished. For 3 weeks, I wandered those streets, and I saw the absolute worst of humanity. People who stepped over me, who spit on me, who told me to get a job. I absolutely did." James said it was the most terrifying board meeting in company history. "I believe his exact words were, 'Sir, I think Stevens actually wet himself.'" His expression sobered. "I meant what I said, Lena. I'll burn it all down if that's what it takes. Because what's the point of having everything if you've got no one real to share with?" She was crying again, but these tears felt different. Cleaner, somehow. Like rain washing away doubt. "I don't know how to be part of your world." "Good. Because I don't want you to be. I want to be part of yours. I want to remember what matters. What's real." He released one of her hands to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Teach me, Lena. Teach me how to be human again." She rose on her toes and kissed him, tasting rain and hope and second chances. His arms wrapped around her like he'd been waiting his entire life for permission to hold her, and she melted into him, into this impossible moment that felt more real than anything she'd ever experienced. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Is that a yes?" "It's a we're absolutely insane, and this is probably going to be the hardest thing either of us has ever done." "That's not a no." "No, it's not a no." She smiled through her tears. "It's a let's try to figure this out together and see what happens." "I'll take it." He kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. "I'll take whatever you're willing to give." They stood there in her doorway as the rain fell and the city hummed around them. Two people from completely different worlds learning how to meet in the middle. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But for the first time in years, Alexander felt like he could breathe, and Lena felt like maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could come true. Even for small-town waitresses who gave away their last $20 to strangers in the rain. 3 months later, the Cross Foundation officially opened its doors. The building was modest compared to the skyscraper that housed Cross Industries, but it was warm and welcoming and designed with input from people who actually used homeless services. Lena had insisted on that, just like she'd insisted on hiring staff who understood poverty from personal experience, not just academic study. Alexander stood at the entrance, watching her direct the setup for the opening ceremony, and felt something settle deep in his chest. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she was arguing with the caterer about portion sizes because hungry people need real food, not fancy garnishes. She'd change his entire life without even trying. The foundation was her idea, born from a late-night conversation about how to actually make a difference. "You've got resources," she'd said. "So many resources. But resources without understanding just perpetuate the problem. You need to listen to the people you're trying to help. Let them lead. Be a partner, not a savior." So that's what they'd built. A shelter that treated people with dignity. Job training that acknowledged their skills and circumstances. Mental health services that didn't require 50 forms and a 3-month wait. Housing assistance that actually helped instead of judging. And today, they were opening the doors to the first 50 residents. "You ready?" Lena appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. Terrified, he admitted, "What if we got it wrong? Then we'll adjust." That's what this is about. Learning, adapting, staying humble enough to admit when we mess up. She squeezed his hand. "Besides, you've got me. I won't let you forget what matters. Promise. Always." They cut the ribbon together, and as the first people walked through the doors, cautious, hopeful, scared, brave, Alexander caught sight of a man about his age, holding a cardboard sign and looking uncertain. He stepped forward, and Lena was right beside him. "Welcome," Alexander said, extending his hand. "I'm Alex. This is Lena. We're here to help however we can. What's your name?" The man shook his hand, eyes suspicious but hopeful. "Marcus. I heard you got beds here, and maybe help finding work." "We do. Come on, let's get you signed in." As they walked inside, Alexander glanced back at Lena. She was crying, but smiling too, watching more people stream through the doors into warmth and safety. That night, after the last resident was settled and the staff had gone home, they stood in the empty lobby. Lena leaned against Alexander's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, both of them exhausted and happy. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For seeing me when I needed to be seen. For teaching me how to see others. For loving me, even though I'm still learning how to do this right. You're doing great." She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "Better than great. You're becoming the man I always knew you could be. Only because you show me how." She kissed him softly, pouring everything she felt into that single gesture. When they broke apart, she rested her head against his shoulder and looked around the lobby, at the comfortable chairs and the coffee station and the bulletin board already covered in job opportunities and hope. "You know what's funny?" she murmured. "What?" "People are going to tell this story for years. The billionaire who went undercover as a homeless man and fell in love with the waitress who helped him. They'll make it sound like a romance novel. Isn't it? No, it's better. Because it's real. Messy and complicated and beautiful and real." She smiled up at him. "And because it's not about the money or the disguise or the fairy tale ending. It's about two broken people teaching each other how to be whole." Alexander pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the feeling of rightness that came from holding her. "I love you, Lena Brooks. Thank you for stopping in the rain that night. Thank you for seeing past the dirt and the disguise. Thank you for giving when you had nothing to spare. I love you too. And thank you for letting me see you. The real you. Not the billionaire or the CEO or the test subject. Just Alex. That's who I fell in love with." They stood there in the quiet building, surrounded by the ghosts of everyone who'd passed through those doors seeking shelter, and the promise of everyone who would come after. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't finished. But it was a start. One act of kindness on one rainy night had changed 2 lives forever. And now, together, they were going to change countless more. Because that's what love does. It transforms. It heals. It multiplies. One sandwich at a time. One cup of coffee. One moment of seeing someone as human instead of invisible. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to change the world. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of unexpected love and second chances. Drop a comment and tell us. Would you have stopped to help? What's the most impactful act of kindness you've experienced? Share your stories below. I read every single one. And remember, sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest waves. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep being kind.